Hello, so thank you for those presentations. It's really encouraging to see all of these exciting advancements on the horizon. So I'm Katie Kowalski. I'm the Associate Director of Education at NORD and really thrilled to be here with all of you today. There's really nothing more powerful than a parent who understands the complexities of living life with a rare disorder and who turns their focus into genuine drive. So it's my great honor to introduce you to our closing keynote speaker, Patty Burks. Patty is a registered acute and critical care nurse and the Director of Clinical Trial Affairs for the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, as well as a bereaved mother. Patty will share the struggles and triumphs she encountered in her child's diagnostic odyssey and highlight the importance of the role of the caregiver. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Patty to share her story.
You're so sweet. Thank you so much. It's really a privilege to be here today. I want to thank the leadership at NORD for inviting me. And let's just jump in. Let's see. Here's a slide. How does this work? Oh, the arrow. I bet that's it. Hi. I'm Patty Burks. I work at the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation as Director of Clinical Trial Affairs. But mostly, I'm a mom. I have 3 children, Daniel, Becca, John. We're here today to talk about my middle child, John, and this is a picture of him. You see, rare disease happens. It happens to individuals. Happens to families. My story is about his rare disease and my family's experience on that journey. So I'm just trying to go just to me now. That's all my slides. So Jonathan was born in 1981. He was my second child. He wasn't as vocal and rigorous about his birth as his older brother, but he was darling, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, fair-skinned, sweet, snuggly, came home at 3 days after birth and just was such a little sweet addition to our family. He seemed to struggle with his weight, and so right away I needed to take him to the pediatrician once a week to get him weighed in and to discuss our approach of what we'll do to try to get some weight on that little frame of his. He started life at 6.5 pounds. By the time he was 8 weeks old, he was 5.5 pounds. By now he was limp, pale, a lot like a rag doll. If you put your fingers under his arms, he just laid kind of limp. About that time, the pediatrician and I both realized there wasn't probably some new feeding technique that was going to turn this around. And he sent us to Little Rock Children's Hospital for testing. We've heard a lot about testing today. This was our big day of tests. And about halfway through the day, they stopped. They said we didn't need to do any more because they knew what was wrong. And the pediatric pulmonologist there took us aside to the quiet room. Every parent in this room knows what I'm talking about. And he discussed to me that my dear, sweet little boy had cystic fibrosis. I had never heard of this disease before. I knew nothing about it. And by nature, I'm an optimist. So I really believed through these 8 weeks that we'd come up with a plan, maybe some medicine, maybe some surgery, but that all would be well. I never dreamed that he actually had a disease, much less a disease that had no cure. He was admitted to the hospital not long after, and there he received care, and my husband and I received an education. Cystic fibrosis is a genetic recessive disease. That means that both my husband and I were carriers of this disease, but at that time, there was no test to identify if you were a carrier. The way you found out was by having a child with CF. We were carriers. The first concern then was the older brother. Was he well? And he was sweat tested, which was the test for diagnosing this disease, and thankfully he did not have it. So it's genetic recessive. It affects multiple organs, but the lungs play a significant role. It causes thick, tenacious, sticky secretions that are difficult to clear. Eventually, inflammation, infection, and destruction. And the cycle goes on and on and on until there is not enough lung tissue to sustain life. Its treatment is pretty rigorous as well. It involved airway clearance. When he's well, we did this twice a day. When he was sick, we did this 4 times a day. Now they have devices to help with this, but back then it was done with clapping. Some of you might be familiar with that. We put the little boy, my little boy, in different positions and clapped on his back to help him move those secretions and hopefully cough them up. There were nebulized treatments. He had to take enzymes every time he ate because part of the disease was this inability to absorb nutrients. So there's multiple organs involved in this disease, but it was respiratory failure that was the final demise of most people with cystic fibrosis. The pediatrician explained it to me like this. It's like a boulder rolling down a hill, and you can't stop it. And the best you can hope to do is to slow the roll. There are no remissions. There are only exacerbations. Those first 18 months of Jonathan's life were tough. He was in and out of the hospital quite a bit. Every time he went in the hospital, I had to find a babysitter for his older brother. You can't bring, back then, you couldn't bring children into the hospital, nor could you stay with your child overnight in the hospital. Those were different times, and they were tough. But by the time Jonathan hit about 18 months old, we seemed to hit some quiet years and where life was a little more normal. Becca joined our family when John was 4 and Daniel was 6. We were 3 little kids. We were happy. We were a complete family. When Jonathan started kindergarten, I still remember dropping him off at school that day. His best buddy, Devin, was in his class, and he exclaimed when I dropped John off, John's here. Now we'll have fun. And I think that's how we all felt. He was a delightful boy, very, very funny little guy. Days were filled with bike rides and excursions up in the hills. We lived in Idaho at the time. Canteens full of water, having to be in when the street lights are on for dinner. They were wonderful, wonderful days. And there was always a hole the boys were digging in the backyard. I'm not sure why, but it seemed that childhood, for these little guys at least, involved digging holes. On Saturday mornings, Daniel and John would work on the cure in my kitchen. Daniel would mix a combination of kitchen ingredients that were never meant to be mixed together, and then make his brother eat it. And I can still hear him say, John, you've got to take it. It might be the cure. And on Sunday mornings, our family went to church. And there we sat, and there we prayed, and there we hoped. I'd always thought that the best in life were things like Disney World, or a trip to Rome, or at least a diamond. But little did I know, when I look back now, the best things that life has to offer includes bubbles and balloons and kites and slides and parks and snuggles and storybooks. And those are the things our hearts ache for when they're gone. Later, as John grew, when he was about 8 years old, he started growing Burkholderia cepacia. It's a very bad bacteria in his lung secretions. This particular bacteria was known for quicker demise and very bad outcomes. And there was this little boy that learned to play chess in kindergarten and poker by first grade, who, I know, it was the residents at Children's Hospital that taught him that. I just want to put that's what happens when moms don't spend the night. Anyway, he loved to draw, he loved to laugh, he loved to make other people laugh. And there he was at 8 years of age, and already we could see that the boulder was rolling, and we could not stop it. When he was in 5th grade, his teacher told me this later, she was having a difficult time getting a math concept through to those 5th graders, and she was getting a bit frustrated. And finally, this little boy, my son, raised his hand. She called on him, and in her frustration, he said, "Excuse me, but there's more important things in life than math." Yes. And so she said, in order to recover, she had to call recess. There are more important things in life than math. When he was 11 years old, Jonathan required a double lung transplant in order to hope to survive. Recovery was slow and never complete. He still found a way to play roller hockey in the church parking lot with his friends, oxygen in tow. But by September of 1993, things were not going well at all. He was back in the hospital. And by September 29th, 1993, with his dad on one side and myself on the other, my little boy passed from this life to the next. Grief is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I really can't go into it. I think everyone in the room knows there's something quite horrible about it. Not everything gets tied up with a pretty bow in this life. My marriage was one of them. And I found myself as a single parent the same year my son passed away. But what I do have words for are my other 2 remaining children, Daniel and Rebecca. And if there's anything remarkable in this story, it is them. They are strong and they are resilient. And despite a difficult childhood, they have grown up to be kind, good people. They might listen to this down the road, so I just want to give a shout out. They are amazing. But now I'll pick up with the rest of the story. Jonathan died in September. I needed to find a way to make a living to support my family. I decided that through my experience, it was really nurses that were so amazing. And everyone in this room with the rare disease, wouldn't you say, aren't nurses amazing people? Yes, yes. I felt that even though we were going down, even though we were drowning, and even though we were not all going to walk out alive, nurses kept us from losing it altogether. And so when I realized I needed to make a living, that no one was willing to support me anymore, I decided to be a nurse. He passed away in September. By January, I was in chemistry. Eventually, I got accepted into a nursing program and graduated and became a staff nurse at St. Louis Children's Hospital, the same hospital that my son received so much of his care. As a staff nurse, I took care of Duchenne's muscular dystrophy patients, SMA1 patients, along with asthma, vent-dependent patients, a lot of cystic fibrosis, some AIDS, and a lot of sickle cell anemia. I got to be a part of families' lives on their very bad days and to make small differences on those days, which was wonderful, and it was such a privilege to do that. But eventually the opportunity came to be an allergy pulmonary pediatric clinic nurse, which was very fun. Here I got to help families wrap their head around managing a disease. I found that really fulfilling. Again, enjoyed it very much and did that for 9 years. But eventually the opportunity came to be a cystic fibrosis clinical research nurse coordinator. Here I found my stride. You see, as a staff nurse, you help a patient through a day. As a clinic nurse, you help a family through a disease. But as a research nurse, if you dot your I's and you cross your T's, if you work very hard for a long time, if you're willing to take on the lack of success we sometimes see, but still work hard, eventually you get to change what it means to have a disease. You get to change the care for that disease. You get to change the outlook and the prospects for those living with that disease. In 2015, I became that CF clinical research coordinator and thoroughly enjoyed that job. Got to see some advances, got to see some FDA approvals. I still remember 2012 when the FDA approved our first modulator therapy. It was only effective for about 4% of our population because it's genotype specific in the way that it works. So it's not a genetic therapy, but it works on the faulty protein that cystic fibrosis patients suffer from. Well, anyway, in 2012, I was driving to work one day and I was listening to NPR and they announced the approval of this drug. And I wept. To have gotten to play a role in that study and see it come all the way to this point, to this fruition, was just marvelous. Well, eventually, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, which is housed in Bethesda, Maryland, it's where our national headquarters are, they wanted to bring on a research coordinator to the national level. And so I applied and got the job. I still don't know why. I'm still just as shocked as anyone. But for the last 7 years, I've lived just outside of Washington, D.C., and helped support our research network. So we have the Therapeutics Development Network, a network of about 91 sites across the country, many of which are listed on your network slide. And they conduct cystic fibrosis clinical drug trials. So now it is my great joy to get to support that network. Since 2012 and that approval that I shared with you, there's been much work, many advances, and in 2019, the FDA approved a drug for the treatment of cystic fibrosis, effective for over 90% of our population. Thank you. This has changed what it means to have CF in the United States. I won't go into all the endpoints and the improvements that this drug is responsible for. Just believe me, it's changed everything. Guess what our patients did? Guess what we saw in our patient registry the next year after the approval? I think this is funny. What do people do when they're healthy? What was that? Well, I don't know. Guess what we did see? Babies. There was a baby boom. And the next year, even more babies. It's really cute what people choose to do when they're feeling better. But oh, that came out kind of funny. I didn't mean it that way, but it is hilarious. We were all home with the pandemic. What else is there to do? But People were feeling better. They were embracing a more normal life. They were embracing the things that adults do, and they have families. We continue on in research. There's a lot of exciting things going on. This compound that was approved in 2019 for 12-year-olds and up is now approved all the way down to 6-year-olds, and the study from 2 to 5-year-olds is ongoing as we speak. What will happen if we get this game-changing drug into people before they even begin to develop lung disease? Well, who knows? Who knows? This is very exciting. In my lifetime, we have changed what it means to have this disease. You see, everyone did their part. Researchers, fundraisers, families, nonprofits, everyone, even parents, and even this parent. When my son was born, the average life expectancy for someone born with cystic fibrosis was into the teens. When he was little, I remember my husband and I would just hope for high school. I never once remember having a conversation with my son about what he wanted to be when he grew up, because somehow we all knew it probably wasn't going to happen. But someone born today with cystic fibrosis, the life expectancy is over 50. Thank you. Yes, that's when you clap. But this is the exciting thing. When that drug that's so effective in our adult and child population gets down to babies, what will be the life expectancy then? Who knows? We just don't know. We're still learning what it means. We're still learning what health looks like on a patient with cystic fibrosis. You know, I want to do one little disclaimer before I close. I always am quite aware that there could be people in the room today who know someone with cystic fibrosis. Goodness, there could be someone listening today who has cystic fibrosis. And I just want to say that what I've shared today is my family story. My little boy who had this disease and then went ahead and got that horrible bacteria at such a young age. It's a unique story. It's a special story. But today, it is not a typical story. So I don't want you to go home thinking it's a sentence of doom. Things have changed, thank goodness. But I want to land with the fact that everyone did their part in cystic fibrosis. You know, way back in the 80s, I used to participate in fundraisers for that disease, never dreaming I would be here now involved in the research for that disease. Everyone did their part. So I would encourage you today, here, listening. Oh, what I would give to sit across from you, to hold your chin in my hand and to hear your story. I know you've had bumps in the road. I know it's hard. Someone said earlier, it sucks. Absolutely, absolutely. But every advancement in cystic fibrosis was done because cystic fibrosis patients participated in clinical trials, every one of them. There is no one else that will move science forward for your disease. These drugs, these compounds have to be studied in people who suffer from the disease. But there is no telling what you can do. You who sit here today, who care about the outcomes of rare disease, who care about those living with rare disease, you are awesome. There's no limit to what you can do, and you are formidable. And that's what I want to leave you with today. You are formidable. Thank you very much.